The bass thrummed through the soles of my worn-out heels, vibrating up my legs as I clutched my cheap cocktail like a lifeline. Dim blue lights cast shadows across faces, making strangers into ghosts and memories into nightmares. The ice in my glass clinked softly against the plastic, a pathetic substitute for crystal, much like how I felt. A poor substitute for the woman I once was. 3 months since the divorce, and I still couldn't shake the feeling of being hollow, scraped clean of everything that made me me. That's when I saw him. Ryan, my ex-husband, leaning against the bar with his new girlfriend. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, confident, wrapped in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His hand rested possessively on her lower back, the same way it used to rest on mine. My throat constricted as memories flooded back. The arguments, the betrayal, the final night when he'd called me worthless before walking out the door. I'd spent weeks piecing myself back together, only to find him here, in the one place I thought I could escape. "You look like you're about to either cry or commit murder." A voice cut through the haze of my thoughts, deep, slightly accented, with an edge that sliced through the music. I turned, blinking back tears I refused to acknowledge. The man beside me wasn't what I expected in this mediocre downtown club. His presence seemed to part the crowd without effort, not because of his height, though he towered over me, but something more. Fundamental. Authority radiated from him like heat from pavement in August. "Neither," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Just realizing I should have picked a different bar. His eyes, dark as polished obsidian, followed my gaze to Ryan. Something cold flickered across his features. There and gone in an instant. He wore a suit that whispered of wealth rather than screamed it, charcoal gray against a black shirt, no tie. The faint scent of expensive cologne mingled with something earthier. Leather, perhaps. And the ghost of cigar smoke. "Your ex?" he asked, though it didn't sound like a question. I nodded, suddenly aware of how pathetic I must seem, hiding in the corner, nursing a watered-down drink, staring daggers at my ex-husband. "Could you dance with me?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "My ex is watching from the bar, and I stopped, heat rushing to my cheeks. "Sorry, that was inappropriate. I don't even know you." The stranger's mouth curved into something not quite a smile. "You don't." His gaze swept over me, not in the leering way I'd grown accustomed to in places like this, but as if he was cataloging every detail. But I know his type. He extended his hand, long fingers, manicured nails, a heavy silver watch peeking from beneath his cuff. Something about his palm, calloused in places a businessman shouldn't be, sent a warning shiver down my spine. "One dance," he said softly. "Make him regret ever letting you go." I hesitated, instinct warring with desperation. Then Ryan laughed, loud enough to carry over the music, his new girlfriend giggling against his shoulder. I placed my hand in the stranger's. His grip was firm as he led me to the dance floor, his other hand settling at the small of my back. The touch was light, but somehow commanding, guiding me through the crowd with practiced ease. As we moved, I noticed 2 men in dark suits shift positions near the bar, their eyes never leaving us. Security, I assumed, though they didn't wear the club's uniforms. "I'm Ella," I said, suddenly needing to fill the silence between us. "Daniel," he replied, though something in his tone suggested it wasn't the name he typically used. The song shifted to something slower, more intimate. Daniel pulled me closer, one hand sliding to my waist. I caught Ryan watching, his expression darkening as Daniel leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. "He's watching," Daniel murmured. "Does that make you happy?" I shook my head. "Not happy, just, I don't know. Vindicated, maybe?" For months I felt invisible, discarded. Daniel's fingers tightened slightly on my waist. "Men who discard beautiful things are fools," he said, his voice hardening. "Or blind." The compliment caught me off guard. In the months since the divorce, I'd become a ghost drifting through my own life, working doubles at the hospital as a nurse just to afford the tiny apartment I'd moved into, avoiding friends who'd taken sides, forgetting to eat until dizziness reminded me. The woman who'd entered this club tonight wasn't beautiful, She was exhausted, held together by cheap concealer and cheaper determination. "You don't have to say that," I whispered. "This is just pretend." Daniel spun me gently, bringing me back to face him with unexpected grace. "I never say things I don't mean, Ella." The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, sent a flush of heat through me that had nothing to do with the crowded dance floor. For a moment, I forgot about Ryan, about the divorce, about the mountain of bills waiting at home. There was only the music, the dim lights, and this dangerous-feeling stranger holding me like I was something precious. Then reality crashed back as I caught sight of Ryan moving through the crowd toward us, his face contorted with an emotion I couldn't place. Fear prickled at the base of my spine. "He's coming over," I whispered. Daniel's expression didn't change, but I felt him shift almost imperceptibly, angling his body between me and the approaching threat. "Let him," he said quietly. Perhaps it's time he learned the value of what he discarded. Before I could respond, Ryan was there, alcohol flushing his face. "Ella," he slurred, reaching for my arm. "What the hell? I've been trying to call you for weeks." I stepped back, bumping into Daniel's chest. His hand came to rest protectively on my shoulder. "I changed my number," I said, hating the tremor in my voice. For obvious reasons, Ryan's gaze flicked to Daniel, dismissive at first, then wary as he registered something I couldn't see. "Who's this? Didn't take you long to move on." The accusation stung, especially coming from the man who'd been seeing his new girlfriend months before our marriage ended. "That's none of your business anymore," I said. "I think you should leave." Daniel's voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "The lady doesn't want to speak with you." Ryan laughed, but it sounded forced. "The lady? Who talks like that?" He stepped closer, alcohol emboldening him. "Stay out of this, man. This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "Whatever. We need to talk, Ella." Ryan reached for me again. Daniel moved so quickly I barely registered it. One moment Ryan was reaching for my arm, the next he was stepping back, Daniel's hand firmly against his chest. "That's not going to happen," Daniel said, his voice dropping to something that wasn't quite a whisper, but somehow more threatening for its softness. "Now, I suggest you return to your date before you embarrass yourself further." Ryan's face flushed darker, anger replacing indignation. "You don't know who you're messing with," he hissed. Something shifted in Daniel's posture, a subtle change that transformed him from merely intimidating to genuinely dangerous. "No," he replied, "you don't know who you're messing with. Last chance to walk away." I noticed the two men I'd spotted earlier moving through the crowd, their attention fixed on our confrontation. Ryan must have noticed them too, because he backed up a step, his bravado faltering. "This isn't over, Ella," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. "We need to talk about the money. Money." Of course it was about money, the final payment from the sale of our house. Money that was rightfully half mine, but that Ryan had somehow convinced his banker friend to misplace, until I signed away claims to everything else. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, finding strength in Daniel's solid presence beside me. "It's my money. You stole it. End of discussion." Ryan's face twisted with anger. "You ungrateful? Enough!" Daniel didn't raise his voice, but Ryan stopped mid-sentence. "The lady has made her position clear. I won't ask you again to leave." For a tense moment, I thought Ryan might actually throw a punch, but then one of Daniel's men appeared at his side, whispering something in his ear. Daniel nodded almost imperceptibly, and the man melted back into the crowd. Ryan's eyes widened slightly. Whatever bravado the alcohol had given him evaporated as he took another step back. "Whatever. She's not worth the trouble anyway." He turned and pushed his way back through the crowd. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my knees suddenly weak. Daniel's hand moved to the small of my back, steadying me. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern lacing his voice. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The encounter had left me shaking, not just with fear, but with anger. Not worth the trouble. After 6 years of marriage, that's what I amounted to in Ryan's eyes. "Thank you," I finally managed. "I should probably go. This was a mistake." Daniel's eyes searched mine. "The night is still young," he said, "and you've barely touched your drink." He gestured to a secluded booth in the corner where my abandoned cocktail now sat, alongside a fresh one. I hadn't seen anyone move it. How did... I take care of what's mine, Daniel said simply, then paused. Not that you are. Mine, that is. But for tonight, while we're pretending. He let the sentence hang between us. An invitation and a warning wrapped in velvet. I should have said no. Should have thanked him for his help, called a rideshare, and gone home to my empty apartment and colder bed. But something in his eyes, a loneliness that echoed my own perhaps, made me nod instead. One more drink, I agreed. To thank you properly. His smile then, genuine, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish, caught me off guard. He offered his arm with old-world courtesy, and I took it, allowing him to lead me through the crowd. As we settled into the booth, real leather, I noted, in a club where most seating was cheap vinyl, I caught sight of Ryan at the bar. He was arguing with his girlfriend, gesturing wildly in our direction. The two men in suits I'd noticed earlier flanked the exit, their posture casual, but their attention never wavering from Daniel. "Who are you, really?" I asked, curiosity overcoming caution. Daniel's fingers drummed once on the table, a gesture of consideration, not nervousness. "Someone who recognizes value when he sees it," he said finally. "Someone who doesn't discard beautiful things." I took a sip of my fresh drink, top-shelf vodka, not the rail liquor I'd ordered before. "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters tonight," he replied. His phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at it, his expression hardening momentarily, before he silenced it without responding. "Important?" I asked. "Nothing that can't wait." He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Tell me about yourself, Ella. What do you do when you're not making fools jealous in nightclubs?" The question was light, playful even, but I sensed genuine interest behind it. "I'm a nurse," I said. "Emergency department." "Not very glamorous, but it pays the bills. Most of them anyway." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "A healer. That suits you." "Because I look nurturing?" I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. "Because your first instinct was to ask if I was okay after I stepped between you and danger," he said. "Most people ask what I'm going to do for them. You asked what you could do for me." I hadn't realized he'd noticed that small moment of concern. "Occupational hazard," I said, trying to downplay it. "I see someone tense up. I assume they're in pain." "And what about your pain, Ella?" he asked softly. "Who takes care of that?" The question hit harder than I expected, cracking something in my chest that I'd carefully kept sealed. "I manage," I said, my voice thick. Daniel reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a touch so light it might have been accidental, if not for the intent in his eyes. "Perhaps it's time someone managed for you." The implication sent a shiver through me, half warning, half something else entirely. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time, he checked it and frowned. "I apologize," he said, "but I need to take this." He slipped from the booth with fluid grace. "Don't move. I'll be right back." As he stepped away, one of his men materialized from the crowd, taking up position near our table, close enough to watch over me, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. I should have felt trapped. Instead, I felt protected. I watched Daniel move toward the exit, phone pressed to his ear. Even from behind, he commanded attention, shoulders straight, stride purposeful. Every few steps, someone would move out of his way without him having to pause. It was only as he reached the door, the colored lights washing over him, that I noticed the bulge beneath his jacket. A gun. The realization should have sent me running, but something held me in place. Curiosity, perhaps, or the intoxicating feeling of safety his presence had provided. Who was this man who carried a weapon so casually? Who had men watching his every move? Who made my dangerous ex-husband back down with nothing more than a whispered word? And more importantly, what would happen when he returned to claim the dance I had so innocently requested? I watched Daniel through the glass doors as he paced outside, phone still pressed to his ear. His expression had transformed completely. Gone was the charming stranger who danced with me. In his place stood someone colder, harder. Even from this distance, I could see the tension radiating through his shoulders as he spoke, his free hand gesturing sharply in the air. Whoever was on the other end of that call was receiving instructions, not conversation. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the club's excessive air conditioning. What had I gotten myself into? The smart thing would be to slip out the back entrance while he was distracted. Return to my safe, predictable life of double shifts and frozen dinners, yet I remained rooted to my seat, drawn to him like a moth to dangerous flame. Another drink? I startled at the voice beside me. One of Daniel's men stood there, not the one keeping watch, but another. Shorter, with close-cropped hair and a scar that disappeared beneath his collar. He didn't smile, but his eyes weren't unkind. "No, thank you," I said. My mouth suddenly dry despite my half-full glass. "I'm fine." He nodded once, then hesitated. "Mr. Vega doesn't often dance." He said the word as if it were foreign. "You made quite an impression, Mr. Vega. Not Daniel, then, or not just Daniel." "Is that supposed to make me feel special?" I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. The man's expression didn't change. "It's supposed to make you careful." Before I could ask what he meant, Daniel, Mr. Vega, returned, sliding back into the booth with fluid grace. The hardness I'd glimpsed outside had vanished, replaced once more by the charming mask he'd worn earlier, but now I knew it was just that. A mask. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, his voice warm as he dismissed his man with a subtle nod. "Business never sleeps, unfortunately." "What kind of business keeps men with guns on payroll?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, emboldened by the vodka and the lingering adrenaline from confronting Ryan. Daniel went still, his dark eyes studying me with new intensity. The silence stretched between us until I thought I might shatter from the tension. "The successful kind," he finally said, his voice dropping to a register that made my skin prickle. "Does that frighten you, Ella?" It should have. Every instinct honed through years of working in a busy ER, assessing threats and diffusing volatile situations, screamed danger. Yet what I felt wasn't fear, at least not entirely. It was awareness, heightened and electric. "I'm not sure yet," I answered honestly. Something like approval flickered across his features. "A rare quality," he murmured. "Honesty without calculation." From the corner of my eye, I caught Ryan watching us, his new girlfriend attempting to reclaim his attention. The sight no longer stung as sharply. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, as if the woman who had once built her life around that man was someone else entirely. "Your ex seems troubled by our conversation," Daniel observed, following my gaze. "Perhaps we should give him something more to worry about." Before I could respond, he was beside me rather than across from me, his arm sliding around my shoulders with casual possession. The movement was so smooth I barely registered it happening until his warmth pressed against my side, his cologne enveloping me in sandalwood and something darker. "Is this okay?" he asked, his lips close to my ear. The question surprised me. Men like Daniel, men who radiated power and controlled rooms without speaking, rarely asked permission. They took. I nodded, not trusting my voice. His fingers traced idle patterns on my bare shoulder, each touch sending sparks cascading through me. "Tell me about the money he mentioned," he said, his tone conversational despite the intensity of his gaze. "The money he stole." The reminder of Ryan's theft cut through the pleasant haze. "It's nothing," I said automatically, the lie bitter on my tongue. Daniel's fingers paused in their movement. "Don't do that," he said softly. "Don't diminish your own worth." His hand moved to tilt my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Not with me." Something in his gaze, a rawness beneath the control, broke through my defenses. "When we sold our house, the profit was supposed to be split equally," I explained, the words tumbling out. "But Ryan's best friend is a banker. Somehow the final transfer to my account never went through. $40,000 just disappeared." Daniel's expression didn't change, but I felt a shift in him, like a predator going still before the strike. "And the authorities?" I laughed without humor. "Ryan's father plays golf with half the police department. The detective said it was a civil matter and to hire a lawyer." I took a long sip of my drink, which I can't afford because I need that money to finish my nurse practitioner program. "So he stole not just your money, but your future," Daniel said, his voice deceptively mild. Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. "It's not your problem," I said. "You barely know me. Perhaps I'd like to change that." His thumb brushed across my lower lip, a touch so light it might have been imagined if not for the fire it left in its wake. "Perhaps I find myself invested," and the word carried weight beyond its syllables. I should have pulled away, should have thanked him for the dance, for making Ryan jealous, for the expensive drinks, and walked out the door. Instead, I leaned into his touch, my defenses crumbling beneath the weight of months of loneliness and struggle. "Why?" I whispered. Daniel's eyes darkened. "Because rare things should be treasured," he said, his voice dropping to something intimate despite the pulsing music around us. "Because a man who would discard someone like you doesn't deserve to breathe the same air." The intensity of his declaration should have frightened me. Instead, it awakened something I'd thought dead, a flicker of worth, of being valued. His phone vibrated again. This time he ignored it entirely, his focus fixed on me with unnerving intensity. "Come to dinner with me tomorrow," he said. Not a question, but not quite a command either. Reality crashed back like a cold wave. "I can't," I said, regret coloring my voice. "I have a double shift at the hospital the following night then." I hesitated. "I don't make a habit of going to dinner with armed strangers." A smile curved his lips, transforming his face into something almost boyish, despite the danger that clung to him like shadow. "Then perhaps we should become better acquainted." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Ask me anything, Ella. Tonight I'm an open book." It was a dangerous invitation from a man who was clearly anything but open. Yet I found myself unable to resist. "Those men," I said, nodding toward the one still watching us from a discreet distance. "They work for you?" "They work with me," he corrected. "But yes, they're under my protection." "And what do you protect them from?" His expression shifted, becoming contemplative. "The world is full of predators, Ella. Men who take what isn't theirs." His gaze flickered meaningfully toward Ryan. "I provide balance." It wasn't really an answer, but it told me more than he'd probably intended. "You're not in legal imports, are you?" I asked, the pieces falling into place with alarming clarity. Daniel laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "Not exclusively, no." His fingers resumed their idle patterns on my shoulder. "Does that bother you? The gray areas?" I considered the question honestly. As a nurse, I dealt with ethics daily. The letter of the law versus what was right for my patients. "I think," I said slowly, "that justice and legality aren't always the same thing." Something like surprise flickered across his features, there and gone in an instant. A nuanced perspective, not what I expected. "What did you expect?" "Judgment. Fear. A hasty departure." His lips quirked. The usual reactions when people begin to see beneath the surface. Before I could respond, movement near the bar caught my attention. Ryan was arguing with his girlfriend, his gestures becoming increasingly animated. As I watched, she grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, leaving him alone at the bar. His gaze immediately sought me out, his expression darkening when he found me nestled against Daniel's side. "Your ex appears to be having relationship troubles," Daniel observed, a note of satisfaction in his voice. How unfortunate. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. "It won't last," I said. "He'll apologize, buy her something expensive with my money, and she'll forgive him. That's his pattern." Daniel's arm tightened around me. "Patterns can be broken," he said, and something in his tone made me shiver, particularly when properly motivated. I pulled back slightly to look at him. "That sounds ominous. Does it?" His expression gave nothing away. "I simply meant that people can change their behavior when faced with consequences." Ryan chose that moment to push away from the bar, weaving slightly as he made his way toward us. The determination in his stride sent a familiar bolt of anxiety through me, my body tensing before my mind could process the threat. Daniel felt the change immediately. "Do you want me to handle this?" he asked, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "No," I said, straightening my spine. "I've spent too long letting other people fight my battles, I slid from the booth, Daniel following with effortless grace. Ryan reached us, alcohol flushing his face. "We need to talk," he slurred, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. "We have nothing to discuss." "The money," he insisted. "It's not what you think. There were complications with the transfer." "The only complication is that you stole it," I said, finding strength in Daniel's solid presence beside me. "And now you're going to give it back," Ryan's face contorted with anger. "Or what? You'll sick your new boyfriend on me?" He turned to Daniel, his judgment impaired enough to miss the warning signs that even I could now recognize. The subtle shift in stance, the stillness that preceded action. "Who the hell are you anyway? Someone you don't want to antagonize," Daniel replied, his voice cold enough to freeze the air between them. "Someone who's quickly losing patience with your disrespect." Ryan laughed, the sound ugly. "Disrespect? She's my wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected again, anger replacing fear. "And I'm not your property. I never was." "The lady has made herself clear," Daniel said. "This is your final warning to walk away." Ryan's face flushed darker. "Or what? You'll—" He never finished the sentence. One of Daniel's men appeared at Ryan's side, whispering something in his ear that drained the color from his face. Ryan's eyes widened as he looked at Daniel with new understanding, an unmistakable fear. "Vega," he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a curse. "You're Daniel Vega." The name clearly meant something to Ryan that it hadn't to me. Daniel merely inclined his head slightly, neither confirming nor denying. Ryan backed away, hands raised. "This is just a misunderstanding," he stammered. "No disrespect intended. I didn't know she was with you." "She wasn't," Daniel replied, his voice soft but carrying. "But she is now." The possessive declaration should have angered me. Instead, it sent a thrill of something dangerous and electric down my spine. Ryan continued his retreat, nearly stumbling in his haste to put distance between us. As he disappeared into the crowd, I turned to Daniel. "Who are you?" I asked, the question carrying more weight than before. "Why is he so afraid of you?" Daniel considered me for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth I could handle. "I'm someone who ensures debts are paid," he finally said. "And your ex-husband has just realized he's significantly overdrawn." The implications of his words sank in slowly, reality rearranging itself around this new information. "You're not just in gray areas of business," I said carefully. "You're a man of influence," he supplied when I trailed off. "In circles most people prefer not to acknowledge. A mafia boss, or something close enough that the distinction didn't matter. I should have been terrified, should have walked, no, run, away from him and never looked back. Yet all I felt was a strange calm, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. "Are you going to hurt him?" I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. Daniel's expression softened slightly. "Would it bother you if I did?" I considered the question honestly, thinking of the nights I'd cried myself to sleep after discovering Ryan's affairs, the humiliation of having to borrow money from my sister to pay rent when he emptied our joint account, the casual cruelty of his dismissals. "It should," I said finally. "But I don't know if it would." Something like approval flickered in Daniel's eyes. "Honesty," he murmured. "Refreshing." He offered his hand palm up, an invitation, not a demand. "Come, this place has lost its appeal." I hesitated, standing at a crossroads I hadn't anticipated when I'd entered the club hours earlier. Behind me lay safety, predictability, the comfort of known boundaries. Before me, with his hand extended and danger clinging to him like expensive cologne, stood something else entirely. Risk, yes, but also possibility. Where would we go? I asked, temporizing. "Somewhere quieter, where we can talk without interruption." His eyes held mine, intense, but not threatening. "My driver is outside. He'll take you home whenever you wish to leave, whether that's 5 minutes or 5 hours from now." It was the assurance of freedom, of choice, that finally decided me. I placed my hand in his fingers closing around mine with gentle strength. "Let me get my coat," I said. Daniel shook his head slightly, and one of his men materialized beside us, my worn peacoat draped over his arm. I hadn't even seen him retrieve it from the coat check. Efficient, I murmured as Daniel helped me into it, his hands lingering on my shoulders. I prefer to anticipate needs before they're expressed, he said, his voice low near my ear, a philosophy that extends beyond business. The implication sent heat rushing through me as he guided me toward the exit, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. His men fell into formation around us, not obviously, but with a choreographed precision that spoke of long practice. As we stepped into the cool night air, a sleek black car with tinted windows purred to the curb as if summoned by thought alone. "Last chance to change your mind," Daniel said quietly as the driver opened the rear door. I looked back at the club, its neon sign flickering in the darkness, then at the man beside me, dangerous, powerful, and watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I'm not changing my mind," I said, and stepped into the unknown. The interior of the car enveloped me in luxurious darkness, butter-soft leather seats, the subtle glow of ambient lighting, and a privacy partition already raised between us and the driver. As Daniel slid in beside me, I noticed the vehicle was larger than it had appeared from outside, with ample space between us and facing seats that remained empty. Armored, I suspected, though I wouldn't have known how to tell for certain. "Comfortable?" Daniel asked as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. I nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of the intimacy of our surroundings. My worn dress, the nicest thing I still owned after selling most of my wardrobe to cover rent, felt shabby against the opulence surrounding me. Daniel, however, looked as if he'd been born to occupy such spaces, his posture relaxed yet alert, one arm stretched along the back of the seat behind me. "Where are we going?" I asked, watching the city lights blur past tinted windows. "A place I own on the waterfront," he replied. "Private, secure." Warning bells should have been clanging in my mind at the thought of going to a strange man's home, especially a man who had all but admitted to criminal connections. Yet the danger that radiated from Daniel didn't feel directed at me. If anything, it felt like a shield, a barrier between me and a world that had shown little mercy these past months. "You're very trusting," he observed, reading my thoughts with unsettling accuracy. "Am I?" The corner of his mouth lifted. Most women wouldn't get into a car with a man they've just met, particularly one whose reputation clearly disturbs their ex-husband. I turned to face him fully. "I'm not most women." "No," he agreed, his eyes darkening as they traced the curve of my cheek, the line of my throat. "You're not." The car slowed, turning onto a private drive that wound through manicured grounds before stopping before an imposing building of glass and stone. Modern architecture with classic proportions, it rose against the night sky. A wall of windows overlooking what must be the water, though darkness obscured the view. "You live here?" I asked, unable to keep the awe from my voice. "One of my residences," Daniel replied, his tone matter-of-fact rather than boastful. "I prefer to be near the water when possible." The driver opened the door, the cool night air rushing in. Daniel exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. As my heels touched the pavement, I noticed we weren't alone. Discreet figures patrolled the perimeter, while a man in a tailored suit approached with respectful deference. "Mr. Vega," he greeted, then nodded to me. "Ma'am?" "Anything I should know about Marco?" Daniel asked, his hand settling at the small of my back with casual possession. "Nothing urgent, sir. The situation from earlier has been addressed. Something passed between them, an entire conversation in the space of a glance." Daniel nodded once, dismissing him. "Ensure we're not disturbed unless it's truly necessary." "Of course, sir." As we approached the entrance, glass doors slid open silently, revealing an interior that matched the exterior's understated elegance. High ceilings, minimalist furnishings in cream and charcoal, with occasional splashes of deep burgundy providing contrast. Art that I suspected cost more than my yearly salary hung on the walls, illuminated by recessed lighting. "This is beautiful," I said, taking it all in. "You have excellent taste." "I appreciate beautiful things," he replied, his gaze fixed on me rather than his surroundings. "Would you like a drink? Or perhaps something to eat?" My stomach chose that moment to rumble, reminding me that I'd skipped dinner to save money for the single drink I'd planned to nurse all evening. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I wouldn't say no to something small, I admitted. Daniel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features into something almost boyish. I believe my chef prepared something before retiring for the evening. Let me check. He led me through the main living area toward what appeared to be a kitchen that belonged in a high-end restaurant rather than a private home. Stainless steel appliances gleamed under recessed lighting, and a marble island dominated the center of the space. Daniel moved with comfortable familiarity, opening a massive refrigerator to reveal containers labeled with elegant script. Grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, or... He checked another container. Beef tenderloin with truffle mashed potatoes? The casual offer of food that would cost half a day's wages at a restaurant reminded me sharply of the disparity between us. Either is fine, I said, suddenly uncomfortable. Really, just a small plate. Daniel paused, studying me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beneath surfaces. You don't need to minimize your needs with me, Ella, he said quietly. Not ever. The statement, delivered with such conviction, cracked something inside me, a wall I'd built around my vulnerabilities after months of having them used as weapons against me. The salmon sounds wonderful, I managed, my voice thicker than I'd intended. He nodded, retrieving the container and transferring its contents to a plate with unexpectedly deft movements. Wine? He asked, opening a temperature-controlled cabinet that contained more bottles than some restaurants I'd visited. Just water, please, I replied. I have an early shift tomorrow. Daniel inclined his head, filling a crystal glass from a filtered tap. As he moved around the kitchen, I noticed how the dangerous edge I'd sensed in him at the club hadn't disappeared. It had merely been channeled into controlled efficiency. Every movement was deliberate, economical, yet somehow graceful. Let's eat in the sitting room, he suggested, arranging the plate and glasses on a silver tray. It's more comfortable. He led me to a space off the main living area, more intimate in scale, with a fireplace that sprang to life at the touch of a button. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the view that had been obscured by darkness outside, the city skyline reflected in dark water, lights shimmering like fallen stars. The view is incredible, I said, drawn to the windows as Daniel set the tray on a low table before a plush sofa. It's why I chose this place, he replied, coming to stand beside me. Water is honest in ways people rarely are. It can't help but show you exactly what it is. Peaceful or turbulent, shallow or deep. I turned to find him watching me rather than the view, his expression contemplative. Is honesty important to you? I asked. Critically, he said without hesitation. In my position, lies are costly. I considered this as I moved to the sofa, sitting at one end while Daniel took the other, leaving space between us that somehow felt more intimate than if he'd sat closer. He gestured toward the food. Please, eat. The salmon was perfectly cooked, the flavors delicate and complex. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the first bite hit my tongue, awakening an appetite I'd been suppressing for too long, both literally and metaphorically. This is amazing, I said after swallowing. Your chef is talented. I'll pass along your compliments, Daniel replied, watching me with something like satisfaction as I took another bite. He takes pride in his work. As I ate, silence settled between us, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken questions. Finally, I set down my fork, the plate half empty, but my curiosity no longer containable. Why am I here, Daniel? I asked directly. Why bring a woman you just met to your home? Feed her dinner? Make her ex-husband nearly wet himself with fear? A smile ghosted across his lips at the last part. Perhaps I enjoy your company. There must be dozens of women who would enjoy your company without the complication of angry exes and financial problems. Hundreds, he agreed without false modesty. But they want what I represent, not who I am. And you think I'm different? I challenged. You know nothing about me. I know you're a nurse who works in emergency medicine, he countered. I know you were married for 6 years to a man who betrayed you, divorced you, then stole money that was rightfully yours. I know you live alone in an apartment you can barely afford while working double shifts to make ends meet. I stared at him, shock washing through me. How could you possibly know all that? Daniel's expression remained impassive. Your ex mentioned 6 years when he called you his wife. Your hands, competent, steady, with short nails practical for medical work, suggest healthcare. The way you assessed the room when we entered, cataloging exits and potential threats, speaks to emergency training. The rest... He shrugged one shoulder elegantly. Context and observation. It was both impressive and unnerving to be read so thoroughly by a near stranger. So you've deduced I'm a hard luck case, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Is that why I'm here? You feel sorry for me? No. The word was sharp, almost angry. Pity is the last thing I feel for you, Ella. Then what? I pressed. Daniel set his glass down with deliberate care. I recognize something in you, he said finally. Something rare. Strength without hardness, vulnerability without weakness. His eyes met mine, their intensity almost physical. Do you know how unusual that is, to find someone who has been broken but not destroyed? Who remains soft despite having every reason not to be? His words struck with uncanny accuracy, piercing defenses I hadn't realized I still maintained. You can't know that about me from one evening, I whispered, though a part of me wondered if he somehow could. Can't I? He moved closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Tell me I'm wrong. I couldn't. For all his dangerous edges and questionable business, Daniel had seen straight to the core of me with disconcerting clarity. The realization left me feeling exposed, vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with physical danger. What do you want from me? I asked. My voice barely audible. Daniel's hand rose to my face, his fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with exquisite gentleness. Everything, he said simply. But I'll settle for the chance to know you. Truly know you. The honesty in his voice, raw, almost painful in its intensity, shattered whatever resistance remained. I leaned into his touch, closing my eyes as his palm cupped my face. You don't even know my last name, I murmured. Martinez, he replied without hesitation. Ella Martinez, 32 years old, graduated from St. Catherine's nursing program 5 years ago, currently employed at Mercy General's emergency department, working on a nurse practitioner degree part-time, until your ex-husband's theft forced you to put your education on hold. My eyes flew open, shock jolting through me like ice water. How do you... I told you, Daniel said, his thumb brushing across my lower lip, silencing my question. I protect what interests me. That requires information, fear, and something darker, more primal, twisted through me. You had me investigated, while we were at the club. He didn't deny it. The moment you asked me to dance. I should have been outraged, should have pushed his hand away, demanded he take me home, deleted this entire evening from my memory. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn to the dangerous honesty of this man who operated by rules I barely understood. Most women would run screaming if they heard that, I said. I told you before, he replied, his voice dropping lower as his hand slid to the nape of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair. You're not most women. The tension between us crystallized into something electric, inevitable. Daniel's gaze dropped to my lips, the question in his eyes clear even without words. I answered by closing the distance between us, pressing my mouth to his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something hungrier, more demanding. His arms encircled me, pulling me against the solid wall of his chest as he deepened the kiss, his tongue tracing the seam of my lips until they parted. I melted into him, months of loneliness and self-denial crumbling beneath the onslaught of sensation. His hands, strong, sure, possessive, traced paths of fire along my spine, my waist, my hips, mapping territory he seemed determined to claim. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, his eyes had darkened to obsidian, pupils blown wide with desire. Stay, he whispered against my lips. Stay the night. Reality intruded like a bucket of cold water. I can't, I said, genuine regret coloring my voice. My shift starts at 6. Disappointment flickered across his features, quickly replaced by resignation. Another time, then, he said, the statement somewhere between question and declaration. Another time, I agreed, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Daniel smiled. A predator who knew his prey would return willingly. I'll hold you to that promise, Ella Martinez. He helped me gather my things, his touches lingering, proprietary, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to stop making contact. As we waited for his car to be brought around, he disappeared briefly, returning with a sleek business card bearing only a phone number embossed in silver. My private line, he said, pressing it into my palm. Day or night, for any reason. I tucked it into my purse, its weight seemingly greater than the small rectangle of cardstock should allow. Thank you, I said, for everything. The dance, dinner, making Ryan look like he'd seen a ghost. Daniel's smile turned sharp. That particular service was my pleasure. He deserved far worse for how he's treated you. Something in his tone made me pause. You're not going to do anything to him, are you? His expression turned unreadable. Would it bother you if I did? I considered the question honestly, remembering Ryan's casual cruelty, his theft, the way he'd systematically dismantled my self-worth over years. It should, I said finally. But I'm not sure it would. Daniel nodded, accepting my answer without judgment. Your ex-husband's fate is in his own hands, he said cryptically. His choices will determine what happens next. Before I could press for clarification, his car appeared, the same driver holding the door open with practiced efficiency. Daniel walked me to it, his hand at the small of my back, a touch that had become familiar in the span of a single evening. Message me when you get home safely, he said, as I slid into the back seat. Is that an order, Mr. Vega? I asked, a smile playing at the corners of my mouth despite my attempt at seriousness. His eyes darkened at my use of his surname. Consider it a strong suggestion from someone who worries. You hardly know me well enough to worry, I pointed out. I know enough, he replied simply. And I intend to know more. He leaned in, brushing his lips against mine in a kiss that promised rather than demanded. Much more. As the car pulled away, I watched Daniel's figure recede in the side mirror, standing tall and imposing before his waterfront home, a man of power, of danger. And now, somehow, a man who had inserted himself into my life, with the precision of a surgeon and the inevitability of fate. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. Address, ma'am. I gave him my apartment's location, then settled back against the leather seat, my mind whirling with the evening's events. Only hours ago, I'd been a woman with nothing but debts and broken dreams, going to a club in a desperate attempt to feel something other than exhaustion or despair. Now I was returning home in a luxury car that probably cost more than I'd earn in 3 years, with the private number of a man who made people like Ryan tremble with fear. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My driver will pick you up at 5:30 tomorrow evening. Dinner at my place when your shift ends. I stared at the screen, momentarily taken aback by the presumption. Then I smiled despite myself, typing back. I don't recall agreeing to that. The response came immediately. You didn't say no either. Is that a no? I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Common sense screamed that I should politely decline, delete his number, and forget this night ever happened. Daniel Vega was clearly dangerous, clearly involved in things I shouldn't know about, clearly the type of man who would complicate my already chaotic life. It's not a no, I typed finally. But 5:30 is too early. I won't be finished until 7 noon. 7:30 then. Marco will wait. I shook my head at his certainty but found myself smiling. Fine. But I'll be in scrubs. Not exactly dinner attire. You could wear a paper bag and still be the most beautiful woman in the room. But if you prefer, I'll have something delivered to your apartment in the morning. Your choice. The offer should have offended me, as if I needed charity, as if I couldn't dress myself. Yet something in how he phrased it, making it a choice rather than an assumption, softened what might have been condescension from anyone else. Let me think about it, I replied. As you wish. The car turned onto my street, slowing as it approached my modest apartment building. The contrast between Daniel's waterfront mansion and my third-floor walk-up with its peeling paint and temperamental plumbing couldn't have been more stark. We've arrived, ma'am, the driver announced, pulling smoothly to the curb. Thank you, I said, gathering my purse. I appreciate the ride. He inclined his head respectfully. Mr. Vega said I'm to wait until you're safely inside your apartment, if you don't mind. Of course he had. That's not necessary, I began, then stopped at the driver's impassive expression. Clearly, Daniel's instructions weren't open to negotiation, but thank you, I amended. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, exhaustion finally catching up with me, I felt my phone buzz once more. Sweet dreams, Ella Martinez. Tomorrow can't come soon enough, I smiled, tucking the phone away without responding. As I unlocked my door, I glanced back toward the street where Daniel's car remained, a sleek shadow against the night. Only after I'd closed and locked my door behind me did its headlights flare to life, illuminating the empty street before disappearing around the corner. Inside my small apartment, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Dishes drying in the rack, nursing textbooks stacked on the coffee table, the worn quilt my grandmother had made folded over the back of my secondhand sofa. Yet nothing felt the same, or perhaps it was I who had changed, transformed in the space of one evening, from a woman trying to disappear into a woman being seen, truly seen. Perhaps for the first time, I touched my lips, still sensitive from Daniel's kisses, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Morning arrived with cruel efficiency, my alarm blaring at 5 a.m. For a disoriented moment, I wondered if I'd dreamed the entire evening. The club, Ryan's confrontation, Daniel's unexpected intervention. Then my phone lit up with a new message, dispelling any notion that last night had been a figment of my imagination. Good morning, Ella. I hope you slept well. There's a package being delivered to your apartment at noon. You're under no obligation to accept it, but I hoped you might consider wearing it tonight. Either way, I'm looking forward to seeing you at 7:30. I stared at the screen, torn between amusement and wariness at Daniel's persistence. Before I could decide how to respond, a second message appeared. Oh, and I've taken the liberty of sending coffee and breakfast to your hospital. It should arrive at the nurse's station by 7. I remember how grueling 12-hour shifts can be without proper fuel. The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. Most men I'd known, Ryan included, had treated my career as an inconvenience rather than a calling. They'd complained about my hours, my exhaustion, the way hospital emergencies disrupted carefully made plans. Daniel, a virtual stranger, had somehow intuited what I needed most on a long shift day. Sustenance and caffeine. That's very kind, I typed back, but unnecessary. His response was immediate. Kindness is never unnecessary, particularly toward those who deserve it most. I found myself smiling as I prepared for work, moving through my morning routine with an energy I hadn't felt in months. As I pulled on my scrubs, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Cheeks flushed, eyes bright with something that looked suspiciously like hope. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. The hospital was its usual controlled chaos when I arrived. The emergency department already filling with early morning accidents and overnight admissions needing reassessment. I'd barely finished checking in when Maggie, the charge nurse, cornered me with narrowed eyes. "Spill it," she demanded, hands on her ample hips. "Spill what?" I asked, feigning innocence as I tucked my stethoscope around my neck. "Don't play dumb," she said, lowering her voice. "You waltz in here looking like the cat that got the cream, after months of resembling a walking corpse." Something happened. I hesitated. Maggie had been my rock through the divorce, covering shifts when I needed to meet with lawyers, bringing homemade casseroles when I forgot to eat, offering her couch when I couldn't bear to be alone. If anyone deserved the truth, it was her. Yet how could I explain Daniel Vega, a man whose very name had made Ryan pale with fear? "I met someone," I said finally, keeping it simple. "Last night, it's new." Maggie's expression softened. "About damn time. Ryan the Rat has dominated your life for too long. What's the new guy like?" Before I could formulate a suitable response that didn't include words like dangerous or possibly criminal, the emergency department doors swung open. 2 deliverymen entered, carrying trays from the upscale cafe across from the hospital, a place most of us only visited on paydays, when the splurge felt justifiable. "Delivery for the emergency department nursing staff," the lead man announced. "Compliments of Mr. Vega." Heads turned, curious eyes landing on me as my cheeks flushed crimson. Maggie's eyebrows shot toward her hairline. "Mr. Vega, huh?" she murmured, as the deliveryman set up a spread of pastries, fruit, yogurt parfaits, and a carafe of premium coffee that made the break room sludge seem like dishwater in comparison. As in Daniel Vega? I stiffened. You know him? Maggie gave me a long look. My brother's on the force. There are rumors. And she pulled me aside as our colleagues descended on the unexpected feast. Ella, honey, do you know what you're getting into? Not really, I admitted. But I'm not as naive as I look. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. Well, at least he has good taste in breakfast and women. Just be careful, yeah? I nodded, grateful for her concern, but increasingly certain that careful was no longer in my vocabulary where Daniel Vega was concerned. The shift progressed in the usual blur of patients, charts, and minor emergencies. But the breakfast Daniel had sent kept our team fueled and, more importantly, made me the subject of endless speculation. By midday, I'd fielded so many questions about my mysterious benefactor that I was almost relieved to be called to the trauma bay for a multi-vehicle accident. Hours later, as I was finally catching my breath, my phone buzzed with a notification from my building's security system. A delivery had been left at my door. A large box wrapped in cream-colored paper with a simple black ribbon, Daniel's package, right on schedule. The rest of my shift passed in a haze of anticipation, curiosity gnawing at me as I wondered what lay inside that elegant package. When 7 o'clock finally arrived, I practically sprinted from the hospital, fatigue forgotten in my hurry to get home and discover what Daniel had sent. The box sat exactly where the security photo had shown, untouched outside my apartment door. I brought it inside, setting it on my bed with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The ribbon came undone with a gentle tug, the wrapping paper falling away to reveal a glossy black box beneath. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a dress that made my breath catch, deep emerald silk that shimmered as I lifted it, the fabric flowing like water through my fingers. It was simple in design, elegant rather than ostentatious, with a draped neckline and fitted waist that would hug my curves without being vulgar. Beneath it lay a matching set of undergarments in delicate black lace, a pair of heels I suspected would fit perfectly, and a small velvet jewelry box containing teardrop emerald earrings that caught the light with hypnotic intensity. The entire ensemble probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. A card tucked into the corner of the box read simply, "No expectations, only hopes. D." I stood for a long moment, conflicted. Accepting such lavish gifts after one evening together seemed precipitous at best, dangerous at worst, yet the care evident in the selections, the modest yet elegant cut of the dress, the comfortable height of the heels, the subtle rather than flashy jewelry, spoke of consideration rather than presumption. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "The car will arrive in 20 minutes. Should I redirect it? Decision time. I could send the car away, return the untouched gifts tomorrow, retreat to the safety of my predictable life. Or I could step into the unknown, accept the dress and everything it potentially symbolized. No need to redirect," I typed back. "I'll be ready." His response was immediate, as if he'd been waiting with phone in hand. "You've made my evening before it's even begun." 20 minutes later, showered and dressed in Daniel's gifts, I hardly recognized my reflection. The dress fit as if it had been made for me, the color bringing out the golden undertones in my olive skin, the fabric draping in a way that accentuated curves I'd forgotten I possessed after months of stress and skipped meals. The earrings caught the light when I moved, drawing attention to my neck, my collarbones, the pulse point at my throat. A soft knock at my door announced the driver's arrival. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my courage along with a small clutch purse and opened the door. The same driver from the previous night stood there, his expression professionally neutral despite what must have been a significant transformation in my appearance. "Ms. Martinez," he greeted with a slight bow, "Mr. Vega is expecting you." The drive to Daniel's waterfront home passed in a blur of anticipation and second-guessing. Was I making a colossal mistake? Moving too quickly? Setting myself up for another heartbreak? Yet beneath the anxiety ran a current of exhilaration I hadn't felt in years, the thrill of being wanted, pursued, valued. The car pulled through the same gates as before, following the curving driveway to the imposing entrance where Daniel waited. Unlike the previous night, he wasn't flanked by security, standing alone in the soft glow of exterior lighting. He wore dark trousers and a charcoal button-down, sleeves rolled to expose strong forearms, the top buttons undone in a way that suggested comfort rather than formality. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as I emerged from the car. Satisfaction, and something deeper flickering across his features. "Ella," he said simply, the word carrying more weight than seemed possible for 2 syllables. "Daniel," I replied, suddenly shy despite the confidence the dress had given me. "Thank you for the gifts. They're beautiful. They pale in comparison to the woman wearing them." He stepped forward, taking my hand and raising it to his lips in a gesture that should have seemed affected, but somehow didn't. "You look breathtaking." Coming from anyone else, the compliment might have felt like empty flattery. From Daniel, with his intense gaze fixed on me as if memorizing every detail, it felt like a fundamental truth being recognized rather than a pleasantry being offered. "Come," he said, not releasing my hand as he led me inside. "Dinner is almost ready." The interior of his home was different tonight, warmer somehow, with soft music playing and candles flickering on surfaces. He guided me through to a terrace I hadn't seen the previous evening, overlooking the water with the city lights twinkling in the distance. A table had been set for 2, complete with fine china, crystal glasses, and a centerpiece of white roses and greenery that complemented rather than overwhelmed the setting. "This is lovely," I said, genuinely moved by the effort evident in every detail. Daniel pulled out my chair, waiting until I was settled before taking his own seat across from me. "I wanted tonight to be special," he said. "A proper beginning, rather than the chaotic introduction we had yesterday." A beginning. The word held promise, possibility, and no small measure of danger. Before I could respond, a man in chef's whites appeared, serving the first course with professional efficiency before disappearing back into the house. "I hope you don't mind," Daniel said, noting my surprise. "I asked my chef to prepare dinner for us tonight. I wanted to be fully present with you, not distracted by cooking." The meal that followed was exquisite. Course after perfectly executed course, each paired with wines that Daniel described with the knowledge of a connoisseur but without pretension. Throughout, our conversation flowed with surprising ease, moving from my work at the hospital to his childhood in Argentina, from books we'd both enjoyed to music that moved us. He listened when I spoke, not with the feigned interest I'd grown accustomed to from men waiting for their turn to talk, but with genuine engagement, asking questions that showed he valued my thoughts. Conspicuously absent from our discussion were specifics about his current business dealings, the source of his obvious wealth, or the reason Ryan had reacted with such fear upon recognizing him. Daniel neither avoided nor highlighted these omissions, simply steering the conversation toward areas we could share openly. As dessert, a delicate chocolate soufflé that melted on the tongue, was served. Daniel's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at it, a slight crease appearing between his brows, but made no move to answer. "Important?" I asked, echoing my question from the previous night. "Nothing that can't wait," he replied, silencing the device and returning it to his pocket. "You have my complete attention tonight." The intensity of his focus, unwavering since my arrival, both thrilled and unsettled me. "You're very good at that, you know." "At what?" "Making a person feel like they're the center of the universe," I said. "Is that a natural talent or something you've cultivated?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "A bit of both, perhaps, but with you, it requires no effort." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "You captivate me, Ella Martinez." Heat rushed to my cheeks at the simple contact and the sincerity in his voice. "I'm just a nurse with too much student debt and an apartment I can barely afford," I said, attempting lightness. "Hardly captivating material." Daniel's expression turned serious. "Don't do that," he said quietly. "Don't diminish yourself, not with me." The gentle reprimand struck a chord, reminding me of how thoroughly I'd internalized Ryan's dismissals, his subtle devaluations, until I'd begun to echo them myself. "Sorry," I murmured. "Old habit. One I'd like to help you break," Daniel said, his fingers now entwining with mine. "You deserve to be valued, Ella. To be treasured." The words hung between us, weighted with meaning beyond their surface. I wondered suddenly what Daniel saw in me that I couldn't see in myself, what value this powerful, dangerous man found in a woman who had been so thoroughly discarded. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had lingered since our first encounter finally finding voice. "You could have anyone. Why choose someone with so much baggage?" Daniel considered the question, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm that sent shivers up my arm. "Everyone has baggage," he said finally. "The difference is in how they carry it." His eyes met mine, dark and intent. "You carry yours with grace, with resilience. It hasn't hardened you or made you cruel. That's rare. Precious." Before I could respond, his phone vibrated again, more insistently this time. A flash of irritation crossed his features as he checked the screen. "I apologize," he said. "It appears this actually can't wait." He stood, bringing my hand to his lips once more. "I'll be just a moment." As Daniel stepped inside to take the call, I found myself alone on the terrace, the city lights shimmering on the water below. The evening had been perfect, too perfect perhaps. The beautiful dress, the exquisite meal, the attentive conversation, all of it felt like a dream from which I would inevitably awaken. A movement in the shadows at the edge of the terrace caught my eye, one of Daniel's security men, I assumed, maintaining a discreet perimeter. The reminder of the world Daniel inhabited, so different from my own, sent a chill through me despite the warm evening air. Daniel returned minutes later, his expression carefully controlled, but tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "I'm sorry for the interruption," he said, resuming his seat across from me. "Business rarely respects personal time." "Is everything okay?" I asked. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." He refilled my wine glass. "Now, where were we? Ah, yes. I believe I was telling you how remarkable you are, and you were trying very hard not to believe me." I laughed despite myself, the tension broken. "I wouldn't say trying very hard, maybe mildly skeptical." "Then I'll simply have to be more convincing," he replied, his smile turning genuine once more. "I have all the time in the world to make you see yourself as I see you." The promise in his words, of time, of patience, of a future, both thrilled and terrified me. "Daniel," I began, needing to address the elephant in the room. "I barely know you, and what I do know is complicated. Ask me," he said simply. "Whatever you want to know. I won't promise to answer everything, but I will promise never to lie to you." I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "What do you do, exactly? What made Ryan look at you like he'd seen a ghost?" Daniel didn't flinch from the directness of my question. "I operate businesses that exist in the spaces between legal and illegal," he said carefully. "Import and export, primarily, but with diversified interests. As for your ex-husband's reaction..." He paused, considering his words. "I have a reputation for ensuring debts are paid and agreements are honored, by whatever means necessary." A diplomatic answer that confirmed what I'd already suspected without providing incriminating details. "You're saying you're in organized crime," I clarified, needing to hear it directly. "I'm saying I'm a businessman who doesn't allow himself to be constrained by arbitrary legalities when they conflict with what's right," he countered. "But yes, some would use that term." I nodded slowly, processing this confirmation of what I'd intuited from the beginning. "And the gun you carry? The men who watch your every move? That's all part of being a businessman?" "In my world, yes." His expression remained calm, open, allowing me space to absorb this reality without pressure. "Does it bother you?" I asked. "The things you have to do?" Daniel considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Some of them," he admitted. "But I sleep well at night knowing I operate with a code that many so-called legitimate businessmen lack. I don't prey on the weak. I don't break my word. I protect those under my care." "And what happens to people who cross you?" I asked, thinking of Ryan's pale face, his hasty retreat. Daniel's eyes darkened. "They receive exactly what they've earned. No more, no less." The answer should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself nodding, understanding the justice in his philosophy even if I couldn't fully condone its implementation. "And where do I fit into all this?" I asked, the question that mattered most. "What am I to you, Daniel?" He reached across the table, taking both my hands in his. "Something unexpected," he said softly. "Something I wasn't looking for but can no longer imagine being without." His thumbs traced circles on my wrists, his touch gentle despite the strength evident in his hands. "I want to know you, Ella. I want to protect you, provide for you, make you smile the way you did when you first walked in tonight." His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "I want to be the man who ensures you never doubt your worth again." The declaration, delivered with such conviction, left me breathless. Part of me wanted to pull away, to remind both of us that we'd known each other barely 24 hours, that such intensity couldn't possibly be sustainable. But another part, the part that had recognized something in Daniel from that first moment in the club, wanted nothing more than to surrender to the promise of his words, his touch, his unwavering focus. "That's a lot to promise someone you just met," I said finally, my voice unsteady. "I don't make promises I can't keep," he replied simply. "And I knew who you were the moment you asked me to dance." The music shifted to something slower, more intimate. Daniel rose, still holding my hands, and pulled me gently to my feet. "Dance with me," he said. No longer a question, but not quite a command. Like the first time, I stepped into his arms without hesitation, his hand settling at the small of my back as we began to move together on the terrace. The city lights our only audience. Unlike our first dance in the crowded club, this one held no pretense, no performance for jealous eyes. It was just us, moving as one beneath the stars, his cheek against my temple, his heartbeat steady against my palm where it rested on his chest. "This is dangerous," I murmured, not referring to his profession, but to the way my defenses crumbled in his presence. "The best things in life usually are," he replied, his lips brushing my ear and sending shivers down my spine. As we turned, the moonlight caught the emeralds at my ears, reflecting green fire that matched the intensity in Daniel's eyes when he pulled back to look at me. Without words, the atmosphere between us shifted, the air growing heavy with unspoken desire. "Stay," he whispered, echoing his request from the previous night. "Stay with me, Ella." This time I had no early shift to use as an excuse, no reason to deny what we both clearly wanted. I thought of my empty apartment, of the lonely bed that awaited me there, and compared it to the warmth of Daniel's arms, the promise in his eyes. "Yes," I said simply, the single syllable bridging the final gap between my old life and whatever lay ahead. His kiss, when it came, held nothing back. Passionate, consuming, a claiming that left no doubt about his intentions. I responded with equal fervor, months of numbness burning away beneath the heat of his touch, as his hands traced the contours of my body through the silk dress, learning me with a thoroughness that left me trembling. "Beautiful," he murmured against my throat, as his lips traced a path from my jaw to my collarbone. "Perfect." In one fluid movement, he swept me into his arms, carrying me from the terrace into the house with effortless strength. I wrapped my arms around his neck, marveling at how right it felt to be held by him, to surrender to the current that had pulled us together from that first moment in the club. As he carried me toward what I presumed was his bedroom, I had a fleeting thought that I should be more cautious, more measured in my response to this man I barely knew. Then his lips found mine again, and caution became the furthest thing from my mind. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight I would be his, and he would be mine. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, gently pulling me from the deepest sleep I'd experienced in months. For a moment, disorientation clouded my mind as I registered the luxurious sheets beneath me, the spaciousness of the bed, the unfamiliar weight of an arm draped possessively across my waist. Then memories of the night before rushed back. Daniel's passionate kisses, his reverent touch, the way he'd worshipped every inch of my body with an intensity that had left me breathless and trembling. I turned carefully to face him, not wanting to wake him, but unable to resist studying his features in repose. Sleep softened the sharp edges of his face, making him appear younger, almost vulnerable. His dark lashes rested against high cheekbones, his lips, which had traced fire across my skin for hours, now relaxed in the hint of a smile. A scar I hadn't noticed before curved along his hairline, the silvery mark a reminder of whatever violent past had shaped him into the man who now held me. As if sensing my scrutiny, Daniel's eyes opened, instantly alert in a way that spoke of years of conditioning. The wariness in his gaze lasted only a fraction of a second before recognition warmed his expression. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep as he tightened his arm around me, drawing me closer. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded, suddenly shy despite our intimacy the night before. "Better than I have I can't remember how long." His hand traced the curve of my hip beneath the sheet, his touch both possessive and reverent. "No regrets?" The question held genuine concern, as if he truly feared I might wish to erase what had happened between us. I leaned forward, pressing my lips to his in a soft, lingering kiss that answered more eloquently than words could have. "None," I whispered when we finally parted. "You?" Daniel's smile was slow, transformative. Only that morning had to come so soon. I could have watched you sleep for hours more. I laughed, the sound unfamiliar to my own ears after so many months of having little to laugh about. "That's slightly creepy, you know, is it?" He shifted, rolling me beneath him with effortless strength, his weight braced on his forearms to avoid crushing me. I prefer to think of it as appreciative. Whatever response I might have made was lost, as his lips claimed mine once more, morning breath forgotten in the heat that instantly rekindled between us. His hands, so careful and controlled the night before, now moved with increased urgency, as if he couldn't get enough of me. I responded in kind, my fingers tracing the muscled planes of his back, learning the geography of scars that told stories he had yet to share. Later, sated and breathless, I lay with my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart as his fingers combed lazily through my tangled hair. "I should go," I said reluctantly. "I have errands to run before my shift tomorrow." Daniel's arm tightened around me. "Stay," he murmured against my temple. "I'll have anything you need delivered. Whatever errands you have can be handled by my people." The offer was tempting, to remain cocooned in his luxury, his protection, letting the outside world fade into insignificance. Yet something in me resisted the easy surrender. "I need to maintain my own life," I said carefully. "At least for now. This is all happening so fast, Daniel." He was silent for a long moment, his fingers continuing their gentle path through my hair. "You're right," he finally conceded, though I could hear the reluctance in his voice. "I don't want to overwhelm you, but at least let me send you home in style." I know you don't need it," he interrupted, propping himself up to look down at me, his eyes intense. "But it would make me happy to do this for you. Please, Ella, let me take care of you in the ways I can." Put that way, as something for him rather than charity for me, I found myself nodding. "All right," I acquiesced, "but just the ride home. I can handle my errands myself." He smiled, dropping a kiss on the tip of my nose. "Progress," he murmured, sounding genuinely pleased. "Now, about breakfast." We spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, sharing breakfast in his enormous kitchen, Daniel insisting on cooking himself rather than summoning his chef. He moved with unexpected competence as he prepared omelets and fresh fruit, explaining that he'd learned to cook as a teenager, responsible for feeding his younger siblings when their mother worked double shifts as a hotel maid. These glimpses into his background, so different from the powerful, dangerous man he'd become, fascinated me. I found myself asking questions, drawing out stories of his childhood in Argentina, his family's immigration to America when he was 12, the poverty they'd endured in those early years. He answered openly, seemingly pleased by my interest, though he remained vague about his transition from poor immigrant to wealthy criminal enterprise leader. After breakfast, he insisted on showing me around his home. The library filled with books in multiple languages, the gym equipped better than most professional facilities, the secure room where his security team monitored the property through dozens of camera feeds. Everywhere we went, his staff acknowledged him with deep respect, tinged with wariness, their eyes flickering curiously to me before quickly looking away. They're wondering who you are, Daniel commented as we returned to his bedroom so I could gather my things. I don't typically bring women here. No? I tried to keep my tone casual, though the implication sent a flutter of pleasure through me. No, he confirmed, his eyes holding mine. This is my sanctuary, not a place for casual entertainment. You're the first woman who spent the night in this house. The admission, unexpected and weighty, caught me off guard. Before I could formulate a response, Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening momentarily, before he schooled his features back to neutrality. Something wrong? I asked. Nothing I can't handle, he replied, tucking the phone away. He crossed to where I stood, gathering my hands in his. When will I see you again? The intensity of his gaze made it clear this wasn't a casual question. I work the next 3 days, I said. 12-hour shifts. Daniel nodded, accepting this without argument. And after? I'm off Thursday, I offered. But I usually use that day to catch up on laundry, groceries, real-life stuff. Have dinner with me Thursday evening then, he suggested. I'll pick you up at 7. And Ella? He hesitated, something almost vulnerable flickering in his eyes. I'd like to take you somewhere public. A proper date, if you're comfortable with that. The request surprised me. I'd assumed Daniel would prefer to keep our relationship, if that's what this was becoming, private, hidden from the public eye given his professional activities, that he wanted to be seen with me, to acknowledge whatever was developing between us openly, touched me in unexpected ways. I'd like that, I said, squeezing his hands. Very much. His smile, genuine, almost boyish, transformed his entire face. Good. He pulled me close, dropping a kiss on my forehead. Now, as much as I hate to let you go, my driver is waiting to take you home. The return to my apartment was jarring. The cramped space, the temperamental plumbing, the secondhand furniture, all stark reminders of the disparity between Daniel's world and mine. Yet as I unpacked the overnight bag his staff had somehow assembled for me, including a toothbrush, toiletries, and even a change of clothes, I found myself smiling at the thoughtfulness evident in every detail. My phone chimed with a message from Daniel. Missing you already. The house feels empty without your presence. I clutched the phone to my chest, a girlish gesture I would have mocked myself for just days earlier. How had this happened so quickly? How had this dangerous, complicated man slipped past my defenses with such effortless precision? I miss you too, I typed back before I could overthink it. Thank you for everything. His response came immediately, no thanks necessary. You bring light to my shadows, Ella. Rest well tonight. The next 3 days passed in a blur of hospital shifts, text messages from Daniel, and unexpected deliveries, lunch for my entire department one day, a basket of my favorite snacks. How had he learned those? The next, and finally, an elegant leather-bound planner with my shifts already marked, delivered with a note reading simply, "To help me count the hours until I see you next." Each gesture should have felt excessive, even smothering. Yet Daniel balanced attentiveness with respect for my independence, never demanding responses when I was working, never questioning my schedule or commitments. His care manifested not in control, but in consideration, in the consistent message that I mattered, that my comfort and happiness were priorities to him. By the time Thursday evening arrived, I found myself counting the minutes until 7, eager to see him again in a way that both thrilled and terrified me. I'd just finished applying lipstick, wearing the emerald dress from our first dinner, having nothing else remotely suitable for whatever upscale restaurant Daniel likely had in mind, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? I answered, expecting perhaps Daniel's driver announcing his arrival. Ella, it's Maggie from the hospital. My colleague's voice was tight with tension. I hate to do this, but we've got a multi-car pileup coming in, at least 8 critical patients. We're activating disaster protocol and calling in all available staff. My heart sank, disappointment warring with professional duty. I'll be there as soon as I can, I promised, already mentally shifting gears. As I ended the call, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, dressed for a romantic evening, but about to head into trauma chaos instead. With a sigh, I dialed Daniel's number. Ella, he answered on the first ring. his voice warming at my name. "I was just thinking about you. Daniel, I'm so sorry," I began, the words tumbling out. "There's been a major accident. The hospital's called me in. I can't make dinner tonight." A brief silence then. "Of course. Your patients need you." No argument, no guilt trip, just immediate understanding. "Is there anything you need? I could have food sent to the hospital for your team, or—" "That's very thoughtful," I interrupted, touched by his offer. "But the hospital will handle that for major incidents. I just wanted to apologize for canceling so last minute." "You have nothing to apologize for," Daniel said firmly. "Saving lives takes precedence over dinner reservations. We'll reschedule when things calm down." Relief flooded through me at his easy acceptance. "Thank you for understanding. I should be going. I need to change and get to the hospital." "Of course. Be safe, Ella. And I'm proud of what you do. Never forget that." The sincerity in his voice stayed with me as I rushed to change into scrubs and head to the hospital, his words a warm glow amid the stress of the emergency ahead. The night that followed was among the most chaotic of my nursing career. Multiple trauma victims, desperate surgeries, the organized frenzy of an emergency department pushed to its limits. Hours blurred together as we fought to stabilize patients, prepare them for surgery, comfort distraught family members. By dawn, exhaustion had settled into my bones, my scrubs stained with blood and antiseptic, my mind numb from the relentless pace. As my shift finally ended, I stumbled toward the staff lounge, intent only on collecting my things and finding my way home to collapse into bed. I pushed open the door to find Maggie speaking with a familiar figure. Daniel, immaculate in a casual suit despite the early hour, holding a tray of coffee cups and a bag from the bakery across the street. "Daniel?" I stopped short, certain my exhausted mind was playing tricks on me. "What are you doing here?" He turned, relief evident in his face as he took in my disheveled appearance. "Ella," he said simply, crossing to me with quick strides. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I assured him, acutely aware of my appearance, hair escaping its ponytail, dark circles under my eyes, the general disarray of 16 hours in trauma. "Just tired. But what are you doing here? It's 6 a.m. Daniel's hand rose to my cheek, his touch gentle as he tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "I couldn't sit at home knowing you were dealing with this," he said quietly. "I brought breakfast for your team and a ride home for you if you'd like it." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes, fatigue lowering my emotional defenses. Maggie cleared her throat behind us, reminding me we weren't alone. "I'll just distribute these to the team," she said tactfully, taking the coffee tray from Daniel. "Thank you, Mr. Vega. It's very appreciated after the night we've had." As she left, giving us privacy, Daniel drew me into his arms, uncaring about the stains on my scrubs or my general dishevelment. "You look exhausted," he murmured against my hair. "Let me take you home." I nodded against his chest, too tired to argue, too touched by his presence to question it. "How did you know I'd be finishing now?" I asked as he guided me toward the exit, his arm supportive around my waist. "I called the emergency department every few hours," he admitted. "Your colleague, Maggie, eventually took pity on me and told me when your shift would end." The image of Daniel Vega, dangerous, powerful man that he was, repeatedly calling a hospital emergency department to check on a nurse he'd known barely a week, struck me as both absurd and incredibly endearing. "You didn't have to do that," I said as we reached his car, the driver opening the door for us with practiced efficiency. "I know," Daniel replied, helping me inside before sliding in beside me. I wanted to. The drive to my apartment passed in comfortable silence, Daniel's arm around me as I leaned against his shoulder, fatigue finally claiming me. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, he was gently shaking me awake as the car stopped outside my building. "We're here," he said softly. "Let me help you up." Too exhausted to protest, I let him guide me to my apartment, fumbling for my keys only to have him gently take them from my trembling hands. Once inside, he led me straight to my bedroom, helping me sit on the edge of the bed. "You need rest," he said, kneeling to remove my shoes. "Is there anything you need first? Food? A shower?" I shook my head. beyond words in my exhaustion. Daniel nodded, understanding, helping me lie down before pulling the covers over me. "Sleep," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "I'll check on you later." I caught his hand as he turned to leave. "Stay," I whispered, the word an echo of his own request days earlier. "Just to sleep. I don't want to be alone right now." Something softened in his expression as he nodded, removing his jacket and shoes before stretching out beside me on the narrow bed that seemed laughably inadequate after the expanse of his own. He gathered me against his chest, one arm wrapping protectively around me as if to shield me from the horrors I'd witnessed during my shift. "I've got you," he murmured. His voice, the last thing I heard before sleep, claimed me completely. When I woke hours later, the afternoon sun filtering through my blinds, I found the bed empty beside me but could hear movement in my small kitchen. Following the sounds, I discovered Daniel at my stove, cooking what smelled like tomato sauce, my tiny kitchen transformed by bags of groceries on the counter and a vase of fresh flowers on my rickety table. "You're still here," I said, surprised and touched that he hadn't left while I slept. He turned, his expression brightening at the sight of me. "Of course. You asked me to stay." He gestured toward the stove. "I'm making pasta. You need to eat something substantial after your shift." The domesticity of the scene, this dangerous man cooking in my humble kitchen, grocery shopping for me while I slept, struck me with its incongruity. Yet somehow, it felt right, as if the universe had finally aligned in ways I couldn't have anticipated but desperately needed. "Thank you," I said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion swelling in my chest. Daniel set down his cooking spoon, crossing to where I stood to take my face gently between his hands. "You don't need to thank me for basic consideration, Ella," he said, his eyes searching mine. "This is what people do when they care about each other." "Is that what we're doing?" I asked softly. "Caring about each other?" His expression turned serious, almost solemn. "I think you know it's more than that, at least for me." The admission hung between us, weighty with implication despite its brevity. We'd known each other barely a week, yet the connection between us had developed with an intensity that defied conventional timelines. I should have been frightened by it, should have backed away from the precipice before us. Instead, I found myself stepping closer to the edge. "For me, too," I whispered, admitting what I'd been trying to deny even to myself. "It's more for me, too." Daniel's eyes darkened at my words, his thumbs tracing gentle paths along my cheekbones. "I know this is fast," he said, his voice low and intense. "I know my life is complicated, dangerous in ways yours shouldn't be. I know you have every reason to walk away from this, from me, before you get in any deeper. But," I prompted, hearing the unspoken word in his pause. "But I don't want you to," he finished, raw honesty in every syllable. "I want you in my life, Ella, not as a temporary diversion, not as an accessory, as an essential part of who I am becoming with you." The declaration stole my breath, its depth catching me unprepared despite the growing awareness of what had been developing between us. Before I could formulate a response, a sharp knock at my door broke the moment. Daniel tensed instantly, one hand moving reflexively toward his waist, where I suspected a weapon was concealed. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. I shook my head, puzzled. "No one." With a fluid motion, Daniel positioned himself between me and the door. "Wait here," he instructed. All warmth vanished from his tone as he moved silently across the room. He checked the peephole, his body language shifting from alert tension to cold fury in an instant. "It's your ex-husband," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Alone." My stomach dropped. "Ryan? What could he possibly want?" "Let's find out," Daniel replied, his hand on the doorknob. "Stay behind me." Before I could protest, he opened the door to reveal Ryan standing in the hallway, hand raised to knock again. My ex-husband's expression shifted from determination to shock to fear in rapid succession as he registered Daniel's presence in my apartment. "Vivega," he stammered, taking an instinctive step backward. I was just..." "You were just what?" Daniel asked, his voice deceptively soft. "Dropping by uninvited to harass Ella after stealing $40,000 from her? Is that what you were just doing?" Ryan's face paled to an unhealthy gray. "I can explain," he said, his eyes darting between Daniel's imposing figure and me, partially visible behind him. "Ella, please, just give me 5 minutes. It's important. Despite everything, the theft, the lies, the casual cruelty of our divorce, some part of me still responded to the desperation in his voice. 5 minutes, I agreed, stepping around Daniel despite his subtle gesture of protest. That's all. Daniel's expression darkened, but he stepped aside, allowing Ryan to enter while maintaining a position between us. 5 minutes, he echoed, the warning in his tone unmistakable. Ryan entered cautiously, his normally confident posture diminished by Daniel's presence. He carried a briefcase, clutching it like a shield before him. "What do you want, Ryan?" I asked, crossing my arms protectively across my chest. He swallowed visibly, glancing at Daniel before focusing on me. "I brought this," he said, setting the briefcase on my small coffee table and opening it to reveal neatly stacked bundles of cash, $40,000, all of it, what I took from the house sale. Shock rendered me momentarily speechless. Ryan, who had fought tooth and nail to keep that money, who had leveraged his connections to ensure I couldn't access it, was suddenly returning it without legal proceedings. "Why now?" I asked, suspicion coloring my tone. Ryan's eyes flicked nervously to Daniel, who stood watching the exchange with predatory stillness. "I realized I made a mistake," he said, the words clearly rehearsed. "It wasn't right, what I did." "You earned that money too. Bullshit," I said flatly, surprising both men with my vehemence. "You've never done anything that didn't benefit you directly. What's the real reason?" A flush of anger briefly overcame Ryan's fear. "Does it matter? The money's yours. Take it and let's be done with each other." Daniel moved then, a subtle shift of weight that immediately recaptured Ryan's attention and drained the color from his face once more. "Answer her question," he said quietly. "Why now?" Ryan's facade cracked, desperation leaking through. "Fine. I need this to be settled, officially settled. My company's being acquired, and the corporate lawyers are doing due diligence. They found the irregularity with the house sale funds." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from our marriage. "If there's any legal action pending, the acquisition could fall through. I need you to sign a release stating the debt is paid in full, and you have no further claims." Understanding dawned with crystal clarity. Ryan wasn't returning the money out of guilt or a sudden attack of conscience. He was protecting himself, his career advancement, his financial future, just as he always had. "You haven't changed at all," I said, a strange calm settling over me as the last vestiges of attachment to this man finally dissolved. "Still looking out for number one." "Will you sign it or not?" Ryan demanded, impatience overriding caution. "The money's right there. More than you'd get after legal fees if you tried to sue me." I felt Daniel tense beside me, his control visibly straining at Ryan's tone. Before he could intervene, I held up a hand, stepping forward to face my ex-husband directly. "I'll sign your release," I said coolly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I want you out of my life completely." "Where's the paperwork?" Relief washed over Ryan's features as he pulled a document from his jacket pocket, unfolding it on the coffee table beside the money. "Just sign at the bottom. It's already notarized." I skimmed the document, a standard legal release, absolving Ryan of any further financial obligations related to our marriage and divorce. As I reached for a pen, Daniel's hand closed gently around my wrist. "Let me read it first," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Ryan started to protest but fell silent at Daniel's look. I nodded, allowing Daniel to take the document, watching as he read it with the careful attention of someone accustomed to contractual language and its potential pitfalls. "It's straightforward," he finally confirmed, returning it to the table. "But I suggest one amendment." He took the pen, adding a line at the bottom before signing as a witness. "There. Now it states that this release is contingent upon the funds clearing the bank, not just being delivered today." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. "Fine. Whatever." I signed the document, a strange lightness filling me as I realized this truly was the final tie being severed between Ryan and myself. No more legal entanglements, no more financial connections, No more reason for him to ever contact me again. "We're done here," I said, stepping back from the table. "You can go now." Ryan hesitated, looking between me and Daniel as if wanting to say something more. Whatever it was, he thought better of it, gathering the signed release and backing toward the door. "Congratulations on your company acquisition," I added as he reached for the doorknob. "I hope it brings you what you're looking for." A flash of something, regret, acknowledgement, crossed his features before the mask of indifference returned. Without another word, he left, the door closing with a decisive click behind him. I turned to the briefcase still open on my coffee table, the reality of what had just occurred finally sinking in. $40,000, my nurse practitioner tuition, a down payment on a real home, financial security I hadn't dared hope for. All returned because Ryan feared whatever consequences Daniel might bring more than he valued the money itself. "You did this," I said, turning to Daniel. "Somehow you made him return the money." Daniel's expression gave nothing away. "I merely had a conversation with him about consequences and priorities," he said mildly. "The decision to return what he stole was entirely his." I stepped closer, searching his face. "What did you do? Did you threaten him?" "Would it matter if I did?" he countered, his eyes holding mine. "The money was rightfully yours. He stole it. Now it's been returned. Justice has been served." The simplicity of his perspective, right and wrong, justice and retribution, struck me with its clarity. In Daniel's world, Ryan's theft wasn't a civil matter to be dragged through courts at enormous expense and time. It was a wrong to be righted, swiftly and definitively. "Thank you," I said finally, deciding the method mattered less than the outcome in this case. "You've given me back my future." Daniel's expression softened as he reached for me, drawing me into his arms. "No, Ella," he murmured against my hair. "You've given me mine." The weeks that followed transformed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined that fateful night at the club. With the returned money, I re-enrolled in my nurse practitioner program, reducing my hospital hours to focus on my education. Daniel supported my decision completely, never pressuring me to reduce my workload further or become dependent on his considerable resources. Our relationship deepened with a natural momentum that defied its rapid beginning. Daniel introduced me to his world gradually, first to his inner circle, the men and women who formed the core of his organization, then to the legitimate business owners who relied on his protection and patronage. I met his younger sister, the only family member he maintained close contact with, and was relieved when she welcomed me with genuine warmth. In turn, I introduced him to the few friends who had stood by me through my divorce: Maggie from the hospital, my sister Clara, my former nursing instructor who had become a mentor and confidant. Their initial wariness of Daniel's reputation quickly gave way to acceptance as they witnessed the care with which he treated me, the respect he showed for my independence, the subtle ways he ensured my happiness without smothering my growth. 6 months after our first meeting, Daniel asked me to move in with him. I hesitated, not from doubt about our relationship, but from concern about losing myself in his world, his wealth, his power. "I need to maintain my own identity," I explained as we discussed it on his terrace, the same spot where we'd first crossed a line from attraction to intimacy. "I don't want to wake up one day and realize I'm just an appendage to your life." Rather than being offended, Daniel listened with typical intensity before making an unexpected proposal. "What if we found a new place together?" he suggested. "Not my current house, not your apartment. Something we choose together, design together. A fresh start for both of us." The solution was so perfect in its simplicity that I agreed immediately. We found a property, smaller than his current home but infinitely larger than my apartment, with the water view he loved and the proximity to the hospital I needed. As we worked with architects and designers, blending our tastes and preferences into a shared vision, I marveled at how seamlessly our lives had intertwined despite our different backgrounds. A year to the day after I'd asked a dangerous stranger to dance because my ex was watching, Daniel took me back to the club where we'd met. The place had been closed for the evening, bought out, I suspected, though Daniel never confirmed this, and transformed with soft lighting and flowers that matched the emerald dress I still kept as a reminder of our beginning. In the center of the dance floor, Daniel dropped to one knee, offering not just a ring, but a promise of protection without possession, of partnership without dominance, of a future where neither of us would have to face life's challenges alone. "You asked me to dance to make another man jealous," he said, his voice thick with emotion I rarely saw him display in public. "I danced with you and found the missing piece of myself. Marry me, Ella. Be my partner in all things." The ring he offered gleamed in the dim light, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, echoing the earrings he'd given me that first night, symbolizing the beginning of a journey I'd never anticipated, but now couldn't imagine living without. "Yes," I said simply, holding out my trembling hand. "Yes to everything." As he slid the ring onto my finger, then rose to pull me into a kiss that sealed our promise, I realized that sometimes the most dangerous decisions, dancing with a stranger, falling for a man whose world was so different from mine, surrendering to a connection that defied conventional timelines, led to the greatest rewards. The future wouldn't be without challenges. Daniel's business, though increasingly legitimate as he transitioned certain operations toward conventional enterprises, would always carry risks. My career would demand time and energy that might otherwise go to our relationship. We would navigate these complexities together. Neither of us perfect, but both committed to protecting what we'd found in each other. That night, as we danced alone in the place where our story began, I rested my head against the chest of the man who had seen me, truly seen me, when I'd been invisible even to myself. "Could you dance with me?" I whispered, echoing my first words to him. "My ex is watching from the bar." Daniel laughed, the sound vibrating through his chest against my cheek. "He'd be a fool to show his face anywhere near you again," he replied, his arms tightening possessively around me. "But I'll dance with you forever, regardless of who's watching." As the music surrounded us, moving together in perfect synchrony, I closed my eyes and surrendered to the certainty that some dangers were worth embracing, especially when they came disguised as a dance with a stranger who would become the love of my life.